and welcome to the program. Ukraine's cabinet of ministers approved the bill on budget policy basis for 2018-2020. The document targets issues of reducing the budget deficit and decreasing public debt. To have a more precise talk about the bill, we're joined today by Volodymyr Dubrovskiy, senior economist at Case Ukraine. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
So, as I have already mentioned, the Ukrainian cabinet of ministers approved a rough draft of the bill concerning the budgetary policy of Ukraine. Could you give us some peculiarities, numbers perhaps?
I would emphasize that for the first time in Ukrainian history, this is a 3 years forecast and 3 years budget policy bill that is of course, far from being perfect, because this is a very hard exercise to do. You know, we are in the very uncertain conditions, so any kind of forecast is very uncertain. But we applaud that the Cabinet of Ministry nevertheless tries to make some midterm decisions and give some benchmarks for the markets, for the economy, for the upcoming 3 years.
So what is the forecast in the draft of the bill?
The information is now scarce because this is only a draft bill. It is not yet exposed on the Verkhovna Rada site. It was just approved by the Cabinet of Ministry. It was not published. But from this information that is available, I know that there are 3 scenarios. This is a good practice. This is an optimistic scenario that economy can grow overall for 11% for these 3 years, which will be quite good, given the Russian aggression and other factors.
Oh, yeah.
This is baseline scenario, and the worst scenario, the economy would be growing only for 1 to 2% each year.
But still, we're expecting the economy to grow, right?
Yes, we're expecting the economy to grow because we have a very low starting point. Of course, there may be a catastrophic scenario if, for instance, Russia will escalate its aggression and there will be some other aggravations due to internal political instability and so on. But no, there is no economist in the world that could predict anything with this kind of scenario. So I appreciate this effort as an effort to put all of this in the mid-time framework. I think that the main shortcoming as of now, as far as I know, is that yes, the budget deficit is targeted at quite decent figures, and this is absolutely right because Ukraine is heavily indebted. But
what is the current number of Ukraine's public deficit?
The number targeted by the government is about 2%, which is quite good by the world standards. But still, I know that many people would complain that Ukraine is tightening the belts too much, but giving the heavy indebtedness and necessity to repay a lot of foreign debt within those years, I think that is really a wise policy. Although what is worrying is that I doubt that this budget policy implies any cut of the public spendings enough to meet the goal that we as economists try to advocate, that the redistribution through public funds should not exceed 37% for the country like Ukraine. Now it is 44%.
So still it's an exceeding number.
Yes, it is like in Germany, like in the very developed country that could afford it. Ukraine cannot afford it, and with this kind of redistribution, with this rate of redistribution, Ukraine cannot grow much faster, which is urgently needed.
What would you say needs to be done for Ukrainian economy to grow as fast as, for example, the German one?
Well, German economy is not growing fast, but Germans could afford it because they are already rich. Ukraine is not rich yet. Unfortunately, it is the poorest country of Europe. Yes, but it will never be rich unless it cuts the public spendings. And cutting.
How should it be done? What should be implemented to cut the public spending in Ukraine?
That's a good question. Now, the low-hanging fruits, like, say, subsidies to coal mining, are already cut, although we need to cut it further. We see that some really deep reforms should be done in terms of curbing the public spending. Especially it refers to social spendings, to health spendings. The health reform is now ongoing, and we hope that it will give the results. We want to reap some fruits of the reform of public procurement, because it is saving lots of money. One of the most necessary reform is the reform of utility sector, because the utility sector is a natural monopoly, and it is now vaguely controlled, and we suspect that the utility tariffs that are paid by the population and partly by the budget because of the subsidies are inflated, and they are inflated with inefficiency and with graft, unfortunately. So we emphasize that the government should immediately start reforming the sector. And this is a hard to do reform because the sector is controlled by so-called oligarchs.
So basically what you're saying is that Ukraine needs to get rid of the conglomerate of oligarchs first and then implement the reform, and then we will be successful enough in cutting the public spending. I
think Ukraine needs the reforms that will deprive the oligarchs from their status of oligarchs, so they that would make them usual, normal businessmen, not benefiting of the state policies, but benefiting of the markets.
Coming back to the budget policy basis for 2018 and 2020, it seems like it's a rather ambitious plan still. It can be implemented and can be put to real life, but can it be over-fulfilled?
Do you mean...
I mean, the numbers that you've just voiced, like the optimistic forecast for the economy growth
oh, yes.
is like 11%. Could it be, for example, 15?
I think it can be, although the risks are still very high. If none of these risks would materialize, then Ukraine has a tremendous potential for growth, because, again, it has very low starting point. And it depends on the pace of other reforms, like judicial reform for the first. That is for the first place, reform number one, but also some economic reforms like tax reform, which is already ongoing, like regulatory reform, deregulation of the economy, like land reform, land market. We can spur the growth of agricultural sector by far, and so on. So, of course, no economic forecast can predict the result of those reforms, should they will be successful. And I hope that we are, as a civil society, doing our best to make them successful.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for such an informative conversation. That was Volodymyr Dubrovskiy, senior economist at Case Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.